Hello everyone, this is Logic, and I'm trying out something new here today. Not only because, as you can see, these are wireless, but also I'm trying to shoot in the landscape format, if you will, like widescreen. And but it's very difficult. I can just tell you right now, it's really difficult to be like somewhat in the center of the frame kind of thing, because and also, like I said, I can look at the camera right there. If I look at that, it's like I'm looking right at you, but then I wouldn't have any chance to look at the frame, like where I am in the picture. So even though it looks like I'm not looking at you, you just have to deal with that, because that's how it is. But yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Star Wars today, because as some of you already know, I did order it a while back on the internet, and because I didn't go to the cinema to watch it or anything like that. I just you can say, for one, I missed it. Like, I don't know what was the cause. Like, why did I miss it? I don't even remember why I missed it at the time. Maybe I didn't have enough money. Maybe it just, like the timing. Maybe I just missed it in that sense. Maybe I wasn't aware. But the point is, I didn't get to see it in the cinema. So I ordered it, and I had a pretty open mind. And I gotta give fair warning, though. I only watched it once so far. So maybe it will improve over time the more I watch it, but because it is like that a lot of times with things. Like, you watch it once and you're not crazy about it, and then you watch it again, you like it a little bit more, and sometimes it's like that. I remember specifically having some CDs that I bought from this guy, and when I say this guy, I mean, like, it wasn't a shop or anything. It was just like some private person I knew a little bit, and he was getting rid of some CDs, and that was the thing, I just picked them up from him. And the thing is how, like, it wasn't my type of music at first, but the more I listened to it, the more, because the lyrics were good. So anyone who knows me, they know I really like good lyrics. So that was the thing. Like, the lyrics were really good, and the music, like I said, even though it was kind of classical in its style, like it was classic rock, FM rock as they call it, radio rock, but it, to me at least, it kind of had a Christian rock vibe to it, and so therefore I liked it from that aspect. But I wasn't crazy about the music when I started out, but the more I listened to it, the more I liked it. So I'm not saying this is going to happen every time, but it can happen sometimes, that some things, they kind of grow on you. And that was the thing I was hoping is gonna happen with Star Wars eventually. But yeah, just to be clear, we're talking about Disney Star Wars, because obviously at one point it was out of George Lucas' hands, and so it's not his creation anymore. And the thing is, and a warning, spoilers ahead. So if you haven't seen the movie, or you're planning to watch them, because maybe you're young and you haven't seen any of them at all, because what I suspect is that when something that has a root back in the day comes back up, I think a lot of new people, they go and watch it without no previous knowledge of the original story. Okay, so I suspect that a lot of young people today, especially if they're not familiar with Star Wars from before, they just go and watch it just because it's out, kind of thing. Like, also back in the day when we still had rental places around, and I don't know for America or any other places in the world if they do still have that. But of course, I would assume, since I have the same kind of system on my end, that maybe you have a TV box where you can rent movies, and That's what I would normally do. But this time, since I know I'm going to have it in my collection anyway, I went and I would have picked it up in the shop had I known, because it actually turned out to become 2 packages. Oh, sorry, I just ate before. 2 packages sent. So in that sense, I ended up paying 2 separate shipping costs, you know. So, but I picked it up, and like I said, I hadn't seen it in the cinema. I was really, really looking forward to it, because even though the last one, episode 7, wasn't the best, it was still pretty decent. And I was thinking, okay, maybe this next one is just going to take it even further, you know. And because that's usually how it goes with these movies that become franchises. You have, especially when it comes to trilogies, you know, it tends to be that the first one just gives you the introduction to the new set of movies, and then the middle one takes it to a new level, and then the last one usually gives you the grand finale, you know. So I was expecting that, and I was hoping for that, and, you know, hoping that I would take it further and improve on what was already there, and, you know, take it to the next level, if you will. And unfortunately, when I did finally watch it, I was disappointed, to say the least, because you expect a movie that's 2.5 hours long, or something along those lines. I don't know exactly the timing. I haven't looked it up just now, because I don't think that's necessary, but it's about 2.5 hours long. And the previous one was only like 2 hours. So you think, okay, in your mind, you know, like, that's what you end up thinking. Okay, they added a half hour extra to the runtime. Maybe that means there's going to be more good stuff in there, you know, more of the things that made you love the original trilogy first, you know. And I did, like I said in the room previously, I did check up on YouTube to see. It was kind of random, really, because it wasn't like I was planning to do this, and I never do plan these things. So what happened is I saw something about it on the front page there, you know, and so I decided to check it out, and the more I looked into it, like, you click, you know how it works on YouTube, you click on one thing and it takes you to the next one, kind of thing, in a way, because you see other similar videos are suggested to you. When you click on one, you have the next one follow, and so on and so on. Hang on a second. Sorry about that, I had to clear my throat, and because I'm still dealing with gremlins, but yeah. The point I'm making is that you think when a movie is that long, they would do whatever they could to make it even better, and have more of the stuff that that improves on the total. And so, hang on a sec. I gotta grab myself a little bit of a drink here. But yeah, I went in, like I said, I hadn't seen it in the cinema, and I went in with a pretty open mind, and was looking forward to getting back into the Star Wars universe. And it wasn't like a total failure, for me at least. Like, a lot of the people that I saw on YouTube, what they were criticizing, if you will, didn't bother me as much. But what did bother me really is the fact that I heard about this years ago, like years and years ago, that 4, 5, and 6 was just part of a 9 chapter saga. And so in opposition to a lot of other franchises, it seemed like this was planned from the get-go, right? And so to me it seemed like George Lucas just decided to shoot those movies at the time when he did, starting with the first one in 1977. I was only 2 years old at the time. And of course, that means most of the Star Wars audience is even older than me. So, but still you could say I grew up with Star Wars, because by the time they were mainstream, every kid in my life, you know, around me, they knew what Star Wars was. And so, and I grew up, like I said, in the video age, so VHS was a big thing, and even up until fairly recently, I had a large collection of VHS, and I still to this day have a large collection of DVD and Blu-ray. Not so much Blu-ray, because that's the new format, obviously, so I only have a few of those, but in total I have maybe around 400 movies. So, but back then I wouldn't say I had 400 VHSs, thank God for that, but I had enough, to say the least, and I was just happy to get rid of them. But back in those days, and even further back, like when I was a kid, that was how we watched movies. And so by the time, like I said, Star Wars was mainstream, everyone knew about it, and it became the whole thing we see today with merchandise and toys and everything. So when you know these characters and you know the story so well, and you love what they did originally, and like I said, you're under the impression, because like I said, this is maybe, I couldn't say exactly when, but I would definitely say it was before even episode 1, 2 and 3 came along. I had already heard about how this was supposed to be 9 movies altogether, or at least 9 stories in a way. Like, it's kind of difficult to explain, but I had heard about that there was supposedly other installments of that saga. So I already knew about that. And like I said, I was under the impression that this this movie series is gonna be, it's gonna have like, yeah, there's 3 trilogies, but at the same time there's a story from A to Z, right? That was my impression. And so the thing is, from what we've seen now, it doesn't seem to be the case. So what the fuck happened, Disney, Lucasfilm / Star Wars? Because given that I had heard about this already long ago, I was under the impression that George Lucas had already written the main story, and whatever the directors had to do was to embellish on it. You know what I mean? Like how to present it filmatically. Like how they present it in the movie. And like I said, I'll give you a perfect example of what I was saying before, how a lot of people were criticizing certain aspects of episode 8 that I basically disagreed with them on, because there was this one scene, and like I said, spoilers ahead, if you haven't seen it, you need to turn off this video right now. But there was someone in one of those videos I saw on YouTube that was pointing out how this whole scene with Leia flying through space was less necessary, and he gave an example of another thing. I can't remember right now from the back of my head what the exact thing was. But the point I'm making is that he was complaining about that among other scenes, like, why didn't you show this over that particular scene or that particular scene? He mentioned a few different ones. And I can definitely understand a lot of the criticism, because a movie that long should have those. And for me, my personal experience from what I saw in Star Wars just recently, like with the latest installment, was how it was so long and it had those little moments here and there, but in in total, like if you don't get caught up in those little moments, if you will, like if you look at the movie as a whole, then it turns out it's kind of boring. It's kind of plain. It's kind of not the Star Wars that you knew and loved. So, you know, it's definitely a weird experience, because you like it because you are a fan, you like the story and you like the characters, and then you watch a movie where nothing really happens, and what happens is completely out of character for them, especially in regards to Mark Hamill's character, Luke Skywalker, you know. Because even he, and that's what I'm telling you, you can go on YouTube yourself and research this like I did. I just came upon it kind of randomly, and I was happy to find it, because to me it actually meant a confirmation that I'm not as crazy as I think I am, because I saw the movie and I was like, okay, like, you know, you weren't that impressed by it at all. And this is a movie, like I said, it's almost 2.5 hours long. So what's the deal, you know? How come they can take such a great story and drive it into the ground like that? And everyone is gushing over BB-8. I'm not one of those people. I'm not gushing over BB-8 or this guy that what's his name? Jeremy from Cinema Sins, the other droid, which I believe ended up getting shot. So, but yeah, there are some like in the episode 7 as an example. I can't remember her name. That little yellow alien with the goggles. I almost want to call her Ma for some reason, because I think it was something along those lines, but I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me on that. But that character was really interesting, and I also like Rey. I don't mind Rey at all. She's fine, and even the other new characters that they've brought to the story. But the only one I had a real problem with, as someone else also pointed out, that I found in my research, is the guy who's Kylo Ren. Like, I've seen girls, and there's something wrong with Adam Driver. Like, he's not... Like, when he's wearing the mask, that's fine. If he was in mask all the time, with that voice, then you wouldn't think about it twice. But as soon as he takes the mask off, it's like, fuck. Are you kidding me? Because if you've seen girls, you know, like, there's something about this guy, and he's not the only one. Like, there's other actors I have the same experience with. Like, the guy who played Charles Manson, that was like the one part where he, and I'm not talking, this guy is not in Star Wars, just for the record, but there was this actor who played Charles Manson in the movie. And in all his other movies, he had this insecurity and mannerisms that were like him. And also, I'm going to take another guy as an example too, in that sense, because there was two of them that I kind of felt the same way about. None of them having played in Star Wars, but I'm trying to make a point here. Like the guy who's the Hulk in the new Avengers movies, you know, Thor movies, whatever. What's his name? I can never remember his name. I know it really, but I can't remember it right now. But you know who I mean, like the new Hulk guy. And they have this thing about them, and it's weird for me, because I was under the impression that if you're an actor, you're supposed to be confident, right? And some of these guys, those two that I mentioned, the one who played Charles Manson, as well as the guy who plays Hulk, every other thing I had seen them in, other than those pivotal roles that I mentioned for them, like, they came across as someone somewhat insecure, or, you know, really not really confident or something, and it bothered me. So I don't know how other people see his portrayal. I wouldn't say Hulk, maybe, because, you know, Hulk is basically a CGI character, but of course Mark Ruffalo, that's his name, the guy that plays guy that plays Hulk, Mark Ruffalo, and or Ruffalo, I don't know how they pronounce his last name, but like, I don't get it. Like, if you're an actor, you're supposed to be that character. You're supposed to be that person. And for the other one that did play Charles Manson, like, he played a soldier in I believe it could have been what's that name with Tom Hanks? It's like a war movie. It's either that one with Tom Hanks or it's some kind of war movie anyway, and it could be Saving Private Ryan. I'm not sure, but it could be that one. And you'll find the guy, the little skinny guy, and those two characters, the not characters, but those two actors. Like, every other thing I've ever seen them in, to me, they came across as insecure or not really confident or something along those lines. And so there's something similar about Adam Driver to me. I don't know what the problem is, but also, like I said, I've seen Girls. So when he takes off his mask, you can't help. Like, maybe, I don't know for a fact, maybe he made his hair darker for Star Wars, or that's really how dark his hair is. So, of course, the whole Dark Lord thing is emphasized in some kind of way, not only from his costume, but also maybe through his hair. But still, when you see that face and you know who he is, and there's something, I always found him somewhat obnoxious for some reason. And in that sense, probably that's maybe a good thing for Star Wars, like, to be, you know, for him to be like a character you don't like, just from the way he looks and everything. But for many people, and that's the thing, like, if the thing that Jeremy pointed out, if you've seen him in Girls, that's the problem, you know. You can't remove him from that perception of him, you know. You can't remove him from that. So when you see him take off the mask as Kylo Ren, you're like, oh. Because I didn't know, like, I remember the first time, before he took off the mask, I had no idea who was playing Kylo Ren. And when he did take off the mask, I was like, oh, why? Like, why did they pick him? I'm sure they could have found someone just as good. I mean, the only thing I would say that this guy has going for him in that sort of a role, because, you know, there was 3 different people playing the character of Darth Vader, in a sense. I don't remember all their names, but obviously James Earl Jones did the voice for him, and one guy is the guy walking around in the suit wearing the mask, and then you have the one guy where the mask comes off when Luke is with Darth Vader, you know. So that character was actually created by 3 different people. So, and the thing is, the guy who played him when he's walking around in the suit, which is also funny when it comes to someone like Hayden Christensen playing Anakin Skywalker, who we later learn became Darth Vader through those original first 3, like episode 1, 2, and 3. You learn how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader, if you will. And so that's the good thing for Adam Driver, you know, the thing that is a plus for him, because he has the height. Because Darth Vader, as always, the guy who played him was fairly tall. And that's why it's funny. It would be really interesting, even today, to look up on the internet and see the various heights for these characters. Like, what's the height of the character James Earl Jones who did his voice? What's the height of David Prowse who played him walking around in the suit? And then what's the height of the guy you see when the mask comes off? Because if I remember correctly, and like I said, don't quote me on this, but I have pretty good memory when it comes to certain things. And not just certain things, but in general, I have pretty good memory. So if I remember correctly, that's even a different guy when the mask comes off. So he was actually created by 3 different people. Just like Kenny Baker was created by two different people. Like one did the sounds and one was the little person inside of the shell of R2-D2. So again, spoilers if you didn't know these things. I'm sorry for ruining the magic, so to speak, but if you don't know this stuff already, you're not a proper Star Wars fan. And I'm not one of those crazy people who go out and buy all the shit, the merchandise and toys and whatnot, but I do know a little bit about Star Wars, I would say. Not that I've delved into the deeper realms of it, because like with anything, you can dig deeper and you can learn more. Like if you go into Tolkien, Lord of the Rings and Hobbit, there's even more than those stories around. There's a whole universe around it, and I assume it's probably the same around Star Wars, because you have Star Wars Rebels, you have now the Rogue One series coming out, and you probably have comics and everything. But the point I'm making is that for some reason, I can't put my finger on what it is, but maybe it would have been a better choice to have someone who's not known at all, but just a really good actor. And I'm not saying Adam Driver isn't a good actor, but the problem is his face. Literally, it's his face. Because you don't expect to see someone, and like I said, if I had never seen Girls, then maybe it wouldn't be a problem. But if you have seen Girls, and then when he takes his mask off, you're like, oh shit. Because as long as he's the guy behind the mask, I think, at least from my perspective, it would be really difficult to say, oh, this is that actor, just from that voice, because it is slightly distorted from the mask. And I don't mind his voice even, but when you see who it is, it's like I said, the only thing he has going for him is the fact that he has the height. He could basically be Darth Vader in the new movies if that was the choice for him as an actor in that sense, because he definitely has the height. He might even be taller than the guy who played him originally. So, but hang on, I'll be right back. I'll just gotta... Oh, not yet. I'll have a couple of minutes more, but you know how it is for me. I'm limited by time. So, but yeah, it's literally his face. Like when he takes off the mask, it's kind of like a disappointment, because you'd rather have someone amazing, unknown, but just someone who looks great for whatever picture you had in your mind, because you make a picture in your mind and then they take the mask off, and then if those two don't match, that's what I'm saying. And for his face being that well known to us in a way, then that becomes a problem in and of itself. But as I was saying, that's for me anyway. I don't know how the rest of you would feel about that, but for me, the way he looks, for one, like someone pointed out in one of those videos I saw, also his portrayal of his character, it's like he's this, how can I say, what was the word they used, because it was such a fitting description for him, like how he's like this angry little kid throwing a tantrum a lot of times. Like he had this thing where he smashed things that not only, most recently I remember seeing him smash that helmet of his, I think, or going apeshit with his lightsaber, something like that. So even from that standpoint, like, that's not how, like, even though the character is somewhat young, and it's not like you're expecting them to behave that way if they're supposed to be this new Dark Lord apprentice type character, you know. Anger, yes, no problem, but not from that I'm inferior kind of place. It shouldn't come from that, because they're basically aware of their own shortcomings, kind of seeming to us as an audience. That's how it comes across, you know. Like, they're aware of their shortcomings and they're upset for that fact, you know. And so that's the problem I have with it anyway. And like I said, I don't know if that's something you agree with me on, but that's just my personal take on that. Because, you know, like I said, from just him removing the mask to certain things in the character at certain points in the story, it just doesn't sit right with me, if you will. It doesn't make sense. Even from, like, you could put any character in there, in that role, and as long as it's true to the type, because as I've said previously in the past, anything you see, whether it be in real life or in a movie, there are archetypes, and the archetypal character should behave in a certain way. You can call it cliches, but they need to be followed. So whenever a character is acting out of character, it becomes even more noticeable, you know. So that's the problem with Kylo Ren. And another thing is, in the first of these last three movies, this last trilogy, hopefully what will be the last official Star Wars movies, you also have the character of Snoke. He's really interesting, to me at least. In the episode 7, you know, they build him up to be this new emperor type of character, and then you come to the how can I say, the confrontation with him, and he goes out, like someone said, you know, in my research, they had the same opinion, and I was really disappointed when I saw it, because they build him up to be this really badass mystical character. You don't know, I mean, he might be known in the Star Wars universe, not in terms of the movies, but like I said, as far as I know, there are comics and stuff about Star Wars, so he's probably known there, and maybe you can learn more about him there. But what I'm saying is, for the audience to the movies, mostly, they don't know who he is. So I don't mind a new character. I don't have a problem with that per se, but he's got to be right, and he's got to be treated right. He's got to be dealt with in the right way. Not only as a character build kind of thing, but also when the conclusion of that character is met. And I also gotta say, the way that both not only Snoke, but we'll get back to him shortly, but not only the way Snoke was taken out of the picture, so to speak, but also you could say the same for Han Solo, and especially in this latest installment, with how Luke, for one, has cut himself off the Force, which is very odd for him to do. And secondly, I mean, it does make sense from certain standpoints, but still, it's funny how he just reconnects with the Force and does something that looks really badass, and you think it's him, and it turns out he was just projecting himself in that situation, if you will. Like I said, it would be such a great scene. I mean, it still is a great scene, but it would have been an even greater scene if it turned out to be real and not just a astral projection or whatever you call it, Because it really shows how far Luke has come with the Force. And to have that be real instead of almost like, movies you watch sometimes and you see something really cool and then it turns out, hey, it was just a dream. And it's like, what the fuck? So the problem is, that would have been a better scene if it actually happened, like if it did actually happen. So what I'm saying is that a lot of these, and I understand, like at least in episode 7, Han Solo's death, and it also makes me wonder, why are they bothering to make a Han Solo movie when he's killed in episode 7? That's another thing that doesn't make sense to me, but I guess it's going to be like his backstory, how he was before the old original trilogy, and how he met Chewbacca and stuff like that. But a lot of people are now saying they're going to boycott because it's another Disney production, how they're going to boycott the Han Solo movie. So, and don't quote me on this, but I believe the movie's just going to be called Solo. So, I don't know. But back to those characters that I mentioned previously, and Han Solo is one of them. Like how, like from one standpoint, it actually makes sense to the story. Like Kylo Ren has to prove himself to Snoke in a way, so that's why he kills his own father, and it's the final thing to open him up to that darkness, the dark side of the Force fully. So from that perspective, it does make sense, but at the same time, having Han Solo die like that, I don't know. It's like they do put you in suspense in that scene for a while because it takes a few seconds for it to unfold. So, it's one of those things where, like, it's and also they mentioned, I just remembered, they also mentioned how there was a scene in episode 8, or not episode 8, episode 7 actually, that both Luke and Leia had like a moment together, and that was the thing I was mentioning before, like how this guy who was talking about it, he was referring to other scenes and saying, how is that more important than that scene could have been, because that scene could have been so great, he said. How Luke and Leia, when Han Solo was killed, they both kind of felt it, because one of them was his partner, Leia, and Luke was Leia's sister, so them having that connection to the third party, in this case Han Solo, both feeling his death and having a reaction and a moment of, like someone, like that person said it, a shared moment of grief over the loss of their friend and partner, And while I do understand that point that they're making, I think personally, just from my standpoint, I thought that whole thing with Leia flying through space was really cool. Like it was amazing, and I only wish it wouldn't just happen the way it did. Like I wish they would have explained that along the lines, either in episode 7 or 8 or along both those movies, how she came to that point, because it's very clear that she had gotten to the point where she knew the Force more than she did when she realizes that Luke is her brother, and he says to her, the Force is strong in my family. My father has it, I have it, my sister have it, kind of thing. So how did she get to that point? That would have been that would have been the thing that make the scene even a greater thing, you know. So it's a shame that they didn't show you how she got there. But regardless, to me that scene was really cool because I understood immediately what the point of that was. Because if you look at some of the other Star Wars movies, you see Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon be in that room full of gas, and just before the gas can reach them, they take a deep breath and they hold their breath. So they are Jedis, obviously. So it's like that's how their explanation for it. But you realize from that scene with Leia, she's kind of like a Jedi herself. Not fully, but, you know, she knows the Force. And I just wished we had a explanation for how she got to that point where she was so in tune with the Force that she could do something as amazing as that. Because by all standards, she should be dead, but she didn't. She was able to... and that was one of those things that Jeremy in CinemaSins had a big problem with, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it was him who pointed that out. Like, to him that was bullshit, but it's because it was never explained how she got to that point. A lot of people will have that reaction from that problem. It was never explained. And so, as I'm sure I'm making pretty good case of here, like, Disney has made a lot of weird decisions for Star Wars, but for me personally, the biggest problem was that I was under the impression that the story was already written. Like, George Lucas only had to not George Lucas, but, you know, he had already written it in my impression. So, you know, I thought the directors only had to give you how they wanted to present it to you, not actually make up a story of their own. Because you can have a backstory, and anytime you have something that's written, you gotta realize it's subject to change due to, if it's a book or a screenplay or whatever, you know, an adaptation for a movie is not the same. So you gotta be flexible enough to say that, hey, there should be some artistic freedom to how you portray it, but it's still got to be in tune with the main points of the story. And so, as even Mark Hamill himself said about Luke in you know, not so much in the 7th episode, but especially in the 8th one, like, he's basically doing things that are out of character for him. And he confronted the director with it even, and that director, as well as the head of Lucasfilm, Patricia Kennedy, I believe her name is, they were like completely ignoring the criticisms. And if even one of the actors, as well as the fans, is going to have a problem with what you're doing with the story because you're completely changing it, then you'd be wise to listen. It's just common sense. Because there is supposed, or at least was supposed to be, a story, and you could say that episode 1, 2, and 3 starts the story. Episode 4, 5, and 6 is the meat and potatoes of the story, and episode 7, 8, and 9 are the conclusion of that story. So, from that perspective, you know, it's what you expect, and then they go completely opposite way with it, and it just ends up being a disappointment. So, for me at least, I watched that movie, and when the movie was finished, episode 8, just to be clear, it's like you sit there, and it's so hard to describe that feeling in words, because you just sit there and you're like, okay, so what was that? You know, because you've spent more than 2 hours on something that really didn't have any proper meat and potatoes to it. It was just a little bit of fluff here and there, but even those moments are not enough to save the movie as a whole. So you end up feeling disappointed, and I wouldn't tell you or anyone to go and boycott Star Wars, because me myself, here's how I'll describe it. I'm gonna buy episode 9 anyway, because I want to have the full Star Wars saga complete, no matter what it is. And I even ended up buying Rogue One, even though it's not necessarily essential to the canon story, but it has some elements to the canon story. It has a few ties to that. So I did buy it regardless. And I don't know, what do I feel about that movie? Like I said, it's okay if you just watch it as an independent Star Wars story, which it makes a very good point of making on the title and on the cover itself, how it's a Star Wars story. It's not part of the Star Wars saga. It was supposed to be a 9-chapter saga, which is a very important point in this. So don't compare the Han Solo movie or Rogue One to the original trilogy. But when it comes to the original trilogy and the supposed 9-chapter saga, then there are certain rules you were supposed to follow. And like I said, I can get over the fact that Han Solo died the way he did in episode 7. That's not a deal breaker for me in total, but when you see that combined with not only, like, there's another point to this point I'm making right now as well, because obviously Carrie Fisher is dead. So, and someone did point out, like, from that perspective, in the scene where she's flung out into space, maybe the logical choice from that standpoint would just to have her die in that explosion, because they've already killed off one of the, because obviously you had the droids too, the old one as well as the new ones. But the point is that if you've already killed off 2 of the main characters, and then in episode 8 you're killing off the 3rd one, that's fine. And I know it sounds terrible, but what I'm saying is, if this is going to be a completely different Star Wars, you might as well go down that road completely. But to let Luke be the Luke he is in episode 8 is completely, utterly unexpected for him as a character in the saga. Because I always had a problem with him supposedly being this badass Jedi in the last movie of the original trilogy. So, because it's a little bit, even Yoda says it to him. You have to confront Vader first, So, from that perspective, it's debatable, but at least there's some, how can I say, already defined outlines for what he's supposed to be in terms of a character. And as someone else said in one of those videos I watched about this topic, when he was working on the original trilogy movies, he was excited for it. He liked where his character was going, and there's been stuff that's been taken out, and the whole scene with him confronting I can't remember right now, but also it has moments, like I said, with Darth Vader, just being a total badass. And I don't know, like, I'm weird like that. I mean, even if something is cool to look at on the screen, for me it's not necessarily, when it's the bad guy, I don't feel, even though it's cool to watch, it's even cooler when it's the hero, So, I mean, different people is gonna see different things, but what I'm saying is that when these characters are acting out of character or is being killed off for no apparent reason, And with Luke, it was definitely a weird one, because not only was he acting the way, like the cliffhanger in episode 7 where Rey just comes to meet him and you don't know where this is going, is perfect. Like the ending of episode 7 is perfect in that sense, because it's open-ended. Like you don't know where this is gonna go, but then you have what actually happens in episode 8 and you're like, what? Because that's not how Luke or even Mark Hamill should go out. Because it was totally disrespectful to the character as well as the actor. And like I said, that's just one of those many things I've pointed out already. Like I said, me personally, I don't mind the whole scene with Leia floating out into space like that, but there was no explanation how she got that far with the Force, and that's why, in that sense, you could say at least it makes the scene redundant. So to actually have Luke be more of the accomplished Jedi would probably be more interesting for the story. And again, now I'm coming back to where I started with Snoke, because I didn't want to spoil it prematurely, if you will, but Snoke is built up in episode 7 to be this really badass Dark Lord Emperor type character in the Star Wars saga. He would be similar to the Emperor. And then when the final confrontation comes, he's just wiped out very easily, and it's like, what? He's supposed to be a dark Sith, you know, he's supposed to be almost at Emperor or Vader level, and then he's just fizzling out by being killed very easily, and I believe it's just by the swipe of a lightsaber, you know. So again, disappointing. Now to actually have him, and I saw the illustrations for that video when I was watching the one that mentioned Snoke, how there was illustrations of him shooting force lightning from his fingers, and that kind of battle would have been really cool to see. And in the scene, I go back to Kylo Ren for a second. In the scene with Kylo Ren, it would be really cool if it was like Luke and Darth Vader. If that was the scene between him and his father, Han Solo, that would have been a cool way to go with that too. So what I'm saying is, and this is just my personal opinion, because I told you already, from that standpoint of him having to prove himself to Snoke and the people on the dark side of the Force, he has to kill his father, kind of. From that sense, it makes sense. From that standpoint, it makes sense. So, but it would have been cool if Han Solo could actually reach him. Like, if he could actually turn him around. Because I definitely feel like there was still hope for him. And you see the whole scene between him and Rey as well. It does indicate that there is hope. But it just seems that those people, and of course Rey wouldn't be the right one, I believe, but it's very disappointing also that you didn't have this moment of his father actually being able to turn him around and make him come back to the right side of the Force, so to speak. So that's another thing that should have been different if you look at what the previous movies has been. And I'm then again referring to the original trilogy, you know. So anyway, like I said, I'm very disappointed in you, Disney / Lucasfilm / Star Wars, because you could have done better and you should have done better, but it is what it is, you know. I don't have the power to change it the way it is, but we can only hope that maybe episode 9 will be something completely different and 10 times better than what episode 8 was. But from what it seems right now, it's very unlikely. It's very unlikely that they can, because, you know, you can't bring people back once they're dead. So, I mean, you can, but most people probably wouldn't believe that anyway. So, you know, that's one side of it. But the other side of it is how, like, you can't bring people back from the dead, but you also, it's kind of hard to bring the story back on track when you've already messed up the story so much as you have. So that's another thing that I think is it's gonna be quite a challenge for them to accomplish. But if they can get it done, then I'll salute them. But is it very likely? I don't think so. Like, I don't think that's very probable. So yeah, that's my little review on the recent installments of Star Wars, and I hope you liked it. I mean, everyone else on YouTube has done this, so this is not new in that sense, but it's new in the sense what I'm doing, because I've never taken on any kind of commercial stuff. But when I did see all those other videos on YouTube talking about how disappointing episode 8 is, and I was already under that impression from just having watched it, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was, but it's like you watch something and you spend that time and you feel, it's hard to explain, but you feel like you didn't get what you expected to get from it. And so it's just, yeah, they took my money and that's what they got, but what did I get in return, kind of thing. So they got paid for me buying the movie, but I didn't get anything in return. So, or maybe not anything, but what I got in return was not very much compared to what they got, if you will. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me ramble on about Star Wars. This is just, I could do one more, but I don't feel like it, and I'm running out of time on this one. So thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you liked it. If you don't, click the dislike. If you like it, click the like. Whatever is fine. But I just wanted to give you my 2 cents on why I think Star Wars is going to have a hard time getting back to where it was. And until I see you next time, have a good one, and peace, everyone.